Okay, welcome everybody. And I'm hereby calling this meeting of the Glendale Community Improvement Corporation, the Board of Directors to order. I will ask that if you're not speaking, please stay on mute. And I will announce, as has been mentioned before, that Mr. Johnson will not be able to be with us due to a family emergency, but it is not serious or health threatening or anything like that. With that, I believe there were no objections to the agenda. Let me just go over a couple of highlights here. Just so nobody thinks there's any hidden agendas here, we have 3 carryover issues from our last meeting that I just want people can keep, those of you keeping score at home can track this. One was that we needed to do a survey of the property on Springfield Pike. Also, we're going to discuss with local developers possible options for developing properties in the village that we had discussed. And we were going to have a survey of the property on Springfield Pike and Summit, around Summit Park. With that, I will also note, relevant to the agenda, that there is a public comment section and that we are aware of 6 individuals who have asked to speak. And since we have only allotted 20 minutes for them to speak, I will exercise the privilege of the chair and expand the time to 24 minutes so each speaker can have at least 4 minutes, unless there are objections from the board. Hearing none, we are going to turn to the minutes of the meeting of February 10th. And those minutes have been circulated and revised and have been recirculated as revised. So I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes as revised.
Mayor, I'll make the motion, but before I do that, I do have one minor correction on the, I apologize for not catching it earlier. At the top of page 1, it has next to my name, the title of GCIC Chairman. That should be changed to GPHPC Chairman. With that correction, I would move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Okay, we will take that as a friendly amendment. Is there a second for the motion to approve?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. We turn now to the mission statement that was introduced last time and that has been circulated in an amended form with some changes by Ms. Verschow. Joan, would you care to just kind of introduce or review some of your changes for us?
Yes, and I think I put these in my memo to everyone. When I went through, first, Don, thank you for even creating the mission statement and your efforts to capture what it is that we are doing on the CIC. I thought I could simplify it, and I went through the code and took some language specifically out of the code as to what our purpose is, or what I should say, what a CIC purpose is, specifically as it pertains to our CIC, which is more in the way of economic development versus a land bank type of CIC. And so again, I tried to simplify it. I took into consideration the request that we include some language about resident input. I did remove some language about attracting and retaining residents, and as well as maximizing the limited business development opportunities we have in Glendale. I didn't think that language was necessary, and I also didn't think that attracting and retaining residents was part of our mission. So I think, by simplifying it, kind of captures more of what we're about. Again, no pride of ownership. If people want to amend it or modify it or make other suggestions, I'm open to that too.
Well, for the record, I like your changes. Mine was a first draft, and first drafts are meant to be edited. And so I like the statement as it is now written. And I would entertain a motion to adopt the amended mission statement as the mission statement of the GCIC. Is there such a motion?
So move. Make that motion, Mr. Mayor. It looks like a good mission statement.
I can't hear you.
I'll make the motion.
I think it's been made already. Becky,
Okay.
do we have a motion and a second yet?
I'll make a second.
We need a second.
Is there any discussion, any further discussion on the statement? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting this mission statement, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are those opposed? Hearing none, the statement is adopted. We turn to a discussion of the potential sale of two properties on Springfield Pike. Sorry about that. Did somebody hear that chime coming in?
I heard a chime. I thought
Sorry
it was
about
me.
that. I don't know how to mute those things. There are two properties on Springfield Pike that we discussed briefly last time, and we did have some action steps on them. So I will call upon our executive director, Mr. Cordes, to discuss one of the properties, which is 1/3 of an acre at 10860 Springfield Pike. Mr. Cordes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. As requested, we further looked at the property. I believe the address is 10850 Springfield Pike. And David Lumsden, thank you for pulling it up on the computer. This parcel is 1/3 acre. The deed is not restricted. We purchased it in the late 1990s because there was a dilapidated eyesore called Agers Truck Stop, which was a business running in the residential district. We purchased it for $40,000 and spent $8,500 removing the property and the foundation and restored it to a grass and treed area adjacent to Summit Park. The property is, as I said, 1/3 acre. It is in the AA2 residential district, which some may know is 1/2 acre. So it is less than the adequate size. However, we have photographs and documents showing that in the mid-1930s, prior to our zoning, it supported a house, a residential house, and as such, it would be qualified as a grandfathered lot, allowing it to be built upon, 1/3 acre versus half. Are there any questions about this property?
One question, would it be correct, Mr. Cordes, to say that this property has been surveyed as per the direction from the meeting in February?
A site plan has been designed, and I think Mr. Lumsden may also have that on file. David, if you could pull that up. While he's doing that, I'll let you know that Mr. Duffy was asked to survey the lot, determine what the exact size is. We don't always trust the auditor's webpage. And so he drew it, and we asked him what the lot would look like to make it a 1/2 acre and what it looks like now. Thank you, David. You'll see towards what is Francis Lane, which is a vacated street, into the Summit Park. The original parcel off of Springfield Pike, which shows, I need my glasses now. I believe it shows 15,000 square feet, 15,086 square feet, which is a 1/3 acre. Conforming, we would have to add 7,445 square feet out of the park. However, as I mentioned before, we can grandfather this property legally, as we have done for other lots that were set out or mapped prior to our zoning.
So this is not really a survey, this is more just a sketch or something?
Well, there are existing pins that he located, so it accurately reflects the true size of the lot.
Okay. So a question is whether this lot is worth putting on the market. Should we put it on the market? Or do we need to have more information before making that decision?
Well, Mr. Chairman, just a comment. If we are considering doing anything with this particular lot, rather than take property from the park, my preference would be to leave it 1/3 acre, allow it to be grandfathered, and consider that. I would not have a preference for adding land from the park to make it a 1/2 acre and market it that way. Whether it's to be marketed at all is another question.
And of course, if it is going to be marketed, that's the decision ultimately of council to appoint the commission to attempt to sell this property. So I guess the question before this commission is just, before the board is, do we want to request that authorization from council?
I would request the authorization so that the CIC has the opportunity to use this lot in whatever capacity would benefit the village. And if it's even, we could put a for sale sign as is and see what happens. I mean, we would owe the village, Wally, what's the investment right now for the village?
That's a good question, Mike. It's $40,000 for acquisition in, I believe, 1997, and then additional $8,500 to raise and restore the lands.
So we would need to at least make that much money plus more to break even. Well, assuming doing the title transfer and all that stuff that needs to happen. So, yeah, I mean, we might need a minimum of $50,000 just to break even to get that money back to the village.
Well, let's think about our mission here, and in part, we have of course, we want to turn a profit whenever we can, but also we are an agent of the village to buy and sell property as the village requests. And so even if we were not to get any funds back over and above our expenses, we would be fulfilling part of our mission, our assignment from the village to, if we sold this property.
Yeah, excellent point. But to also go on, as Mike Bessel mentioned, we have yet to decide whether there's a need other than building a house. This could be an access to Summit Park if Summit Park was deemed to be available for development, if we have found no deed restrictions. So there's a lot of avenues that could still be open.
You're giving us a good segue into the next part of the discussion, which is the other property here. Is there any further discussion, though, of this particular property, the 1/3 acre?
Other than to clarify my point, which was not, I understand Mr. Beaugrand's point about access, but my point was to say if the property would be marketed, my preference or recommendation, since we can't make the choice, the village does, would to be to market or sell it as the 1/3 acre and prefer not to take a section of parkland just for the sake of one lot. That's not my preference.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I think, I don't think there's any harm in testing the market by putting it in as, I think Mike said, as is, the way, see if there's any interest or, if there is an opportunity there for someone else. But, move on from there if we're not successful. But I think it's a good way to test the market by selling it as is.
Good point.
Okay, is there a motion then to seek the authority of council to put this property on the market for sale?
I mean, I would make a motion that we offer council an opportunity to market this property for the village for a residential home and see what comes of it.
The CIC would, the CIC would have the responsibility of marketing it.
Yes, correct.
If one were to add the additional property to that lot, would it significantly increase the value by adding what approximately one half, another 7,000 square feet? Would that increase the?
Could I, before we go on, before we answer that question, could I know, do we have a second on this motion?
Second.
Okay. Now, Jeff, your question is, would adding on to the property significantly increase its value?
That's correct.
I might be able to help with that. I think if it's a buildable lot at 1/3 acre or a buildable lot at 1/2 acre, I think the incremental difference of is it 7,444 square feet probably would not significantly increase the value of the property. But I might add that in keeping with Mr. Bessel and Ms. Rochot's comments, when speaking to Tom Autifer, he's concerned that that is the outfield of Summit. And if we take land from that, it would potentially reduce the usability of the outfield and the baseball field at Summit Park.
I agree with that analysis as well, Wally. In particular, if whoever builds a house there, if one is ever built, would essentially have the Summit Field as their backyard without paying for it. So I don't think I think is marginal value in adding that. So I'm full agree with Mike and Joan in keeping it at a 1/3 acre and testing the market just to see
Good
what's out
point.
there.
I agree too. I wouldn't want to do anything that interferes with the use and enjoyment of Summit Park.
And I would add that I believe that the lots 54 through 65 that abut that side may fall under what our preliminary research had shown might have a deed restriction limiting that part of the park at least to village use.
Okay.
Let's see, we have a motion on the table here to seek the authority of council to put this property, the 1/3 acre parcel shown here as lot 2 on the market for sale. And unless there's further discussion, I would like to just call for a vote on this. Everybody in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, I believe that motion is carried then. Kathy, be sure to stop me if I keep asking for voice votes and I really need a roll call. So it just moves faster that way. We now have another piece of property on Springfield Pike, which is 3 acres north of the water tower. And David is going to show it to us now. And David, you have some background on this that I think you can share with us.
I do. Thank you. So this property, which for ease of use, I'm referring to as the water tower property, is actually deeded in Hamilton County as one consolidated, rather than one consolidated lot. It's listed together. So that's why on the CAGIS map here, you're seeing a sort of a strange layout where it includes half of Summit Park. But as the property down here on Springfield Pike this is also zone AA2, which would require half an acre lot minimums. The section that we're referring to for this property, I'm going to draw it on the map here, is about, if it will let me, there we go, is 3.43 acres in size. As of right now, we're doing some preliminary deed research on this. The CIC may have heard at one point that there's potential for restrictions on Summit Park based on when it was deeded to the village, that it would have to be used for public recreation only. As of right now, we don't seem to think, based on Kathy Ryan's very thorough research, that the deed restrictions that exist for the park exist for this parcel as well. So there is quite a bit of opportunity with this parcel just north of our water tower.
Are there any questions of David, or maybe we can just discuss a little bit about what information we would need to make any decision about what should be done with this property? I'm told that it is somewhat low-lying and prone to become wet during rains and that. Wally, do you have any information on that you can share with us?
I'm sorry, I'm on the phone with Marilyn Duke trying to resolve a connectivity issue. Can you repeat the question, please?
I can take that. Yes, there is some, say, standing water, low-lying areas for this parcel that would require some evaluation by a developer or engineer to determine what steps would need to be taken. I'm unclear as to the details of how dire that situation is, but it is certainly taking something into consideration. The other thing that I will add is that Kathy, and feel free to jump in here as well, but Kathy is working with some individuals to do deed research on this. There's an estimated cost of $225 for full research of the deeds for this property to confirm that there are no restrictions on it. So that might be something worth consideration from the CIC. Kathy, I'm not sure if you have anything to add about that.
Just that there would be an opinion letter offered by our title attorney, Bob Hines, for that cost that would provide would support our preliminary analysis that finds no deed restrictions. His would be a complete analysis to give us an official declaration that that's the case with this property.
Just wondering, is there anything we can do to assess the viability, feasibility of putting homes on these properties? Obviously, it hasn't been done to date, so the free market has not yet taken advantage of it. And I'm just wondering, and I'm asking for expertise from our experienced real estate people, builders, what we might do to decide whether there is, how worthwhile it is to pursue this.
Well, Don, I'm not a builder, but I do have some building experience, not really even development experience, but in situations like this, it's basically a land study, and you determine if there are water issues, and there are water issues over there. I know from working on the baseball fields, most of the water that falls onto Summit Park, most of the rain that falls onto Summit Park heads right in that direction. But with stormwater management, detention or retention areas, it then becomes a mathematical equation as to whether it's worthwhile to do that work in order to make the land buildable. So it's probably worth the research if there's a desire to put residential homes or something there.
Well, I think you once told me, Mike, that when we start studying water, it gets very expensive.
When you
So-
start paying, that's when you start paying fees, yes.
So is there a way we can do this efficiently, to at least get a general idea of what might have to happen in order to develop on this property?
Tom Waldorfer and I can go over there and put our thumb in the air like so and say, you'll need a detention pond, or some stormwater control. No doubt there'll be stormwater control, but without spending some money with an engineer who can give you an exact answer, you won't know what the answer is.
Just trying to play this one out, do we, and maybe we just do it step by step. If we do a kind of general look, see you and Tom sticking your finger in the air or whatever, and you say, well, we think it's manageable. Would that be enough for us to go to council and say, do you want us to put this on the market? We can't tell you, no guarantees of success, but at least it's a big chunk of land that might be useful to people.
Well, that's a good question. Sticking my neck out. There's room next to the water tower, south of the shaded area, to accommodate some amount of water runoff. And then there are things that can be done with underground detention, but that's more expensive, both from an engineering standpoint and a construction standpoint. So again, I think you cannot know definitively what could be done with that land until you figured out stormwater control. And we know that the water flows over there.
Hey, Don.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Could you impose upon our village engineer to join Mike and Tom Alderfer on that visit, just to give a thumbnail opinion of whether or not it can be developed? Certainly you wouldn't impose upon him to do a full-blown analysis, but at least a lunch and a cup of coffee would get you an opinion, I would think.
Well, I would turn to Wally on that one and David and ask whether how our engineers would feel about doing a little work on spec.
Well, I can jump in. I think they would be interested in evaluating the property to look at it to see what scope of work might be needed. And you could certainly discover, as Mike mentioned, what areas need to be addressed. I will point out that in 1996, when we installed the water tower, we installed it at the highest point in Glendale. And it's the highest sea elevation. I believe it's 826 feet sea elevation. And in relation to where the sewer plant is 600, so we're 224 feet higher than the sewer plant. My point is that, as Mike mentioned, there is definitely water there. A lot of it does make its way to a very deep swale that's along the ditch line heading towards Woodlawn. And then it also heads towards Springdale, going in, and also into the stormwater system. But Mike is quite correct. The land is lower in the center of that lot. And what would happen if you leveled it? Could the water be transferred to the swale to drain towards Woodlawn? And those are questions an engineer could be very helpful with.
Right. And we certainly would not want it to head back towards the park. If you look at where the A diamond is, and we fought this battle a little bit, and you can see from the topography, you can see the outline, you can see the two dugouts and the outline of the infield. And there's at least a 1.5 to 2 foot drop behind that infield to allow water to go from Van Ness and continue across and into that area that we're talking about, so that it doesn't puddle on the park land itself. So there's a lot of water headed that way. And we wouldn't want to do something that would make the water go back towards the park.
So as we're talking about Summit Park, so we're talking about that little quadrant there on top. Do we have any other information about the other portions of Summit with regards to deed restrictions?
It appears that probably everything or a great deal of everything to the east of the water tower, that where you see Summit Park there with the blue, right below the blue line, everything there east probably has a deed restriction on it.
I'm almost certain the section a little bit to the east of the park that shows a number 718, that was, Wally, correct me if I'm wrong, the homeowner dedicated that or donated that to the village, did they not?
Yes, and that one definitely has a restriction for park purposes only to the east of Summit Park.
That would be an ideal spot. It's kind of too bad it's restricted.
Well, the reason I'm asking that is because the question always comes up, not just from me, but from other people on what are the restrictions, especially this is one of our largest land mass areas that we have. The park has no trees other than 3 baseball fields that are sparsely used, to my knowledge. And so it's one of those, how much land do we have? What are the restrictions within that whole community of Summit? I mean, everything that's in the swampy area there has trees, and you could call that somewhat of a part of the green belt structure that we have in Glendale. So I'm just throwing that out there so that if there were no restrictions other than the property that was donated by the resident, then it would make all of Summit an opportunity for development. And I'm not saying we would develop all of Summit into residential stuff, but maybe a portion of it so that we can better utilize that surface area that in my mind is very underutilized and we have to mow it all the time. The other portion has trees, it has water. I mean, I've walked through that area. I'd like to think it's because we had a big water leak in that area that Kevin Bell found, but I think it's standing water as the topography shows. So,
Hey, Mike, when you say it's underutilized, you're saying it's seasonally utilized. There's
even then, in the last 15 years, I mean, I drive, I go back there all the time during the summers and everything else, and it's like, unfortunately, we have very few kids that use the field or residents that use the field. I mean, it's a lot of grass, which, it's nice to look at and everything else. But I'm just looking at all the mass area and within Glendale, and, as the treasurer of Glendale, I look at non-productive surface areas in Glendale that don't provide revenue. And that's a huge one here.
Well, I know it's not used every day. Here towards the end of March, there are quite a few more families moving into Glendale. I help with instructional soccer and t-ball. There'll be enough kids under the age of 5 to have 2 t-ball teams. That means 20 plus kids will be using the park a couple of days a week. We'll need 2 baseball fields at that time. And I know it's, a short period of time in the evening, but it does provide that amenity. And if this trend continues, we had 2 years ago, there were about 12, 14 kids, then we had 18, now we'll have 22. So I think there are younger families moving in, and I think this is attractive for them. I'm not sure how many people rent the park. Our family uses it on occasion just to go and do things there. I don't know how many other people still do.
I can't provide an exact number at this moment, but between the Summit Park Shelter and the Washington Park Shelter, they are pretty heavily rented during the summer months.
By residents or people from outside?
By both types of groups.
Yeah, Washington is our premier park. The other area where I thought we had a baseball field, but I don't necessarily see many people using that field is Sonder Park.
Thunder Park is not large enough for a baseball field.
So it's just a grass area that we just mowed today.
That's
It was a
a
soccer field.
it's been a soccer field for years now.
Okay.
Our kids used it.
Yeah, again, guys, I don't want to come across it. I'm trying to wipe out all the parks. I'm just looking for how to better utilize the land that Glendale has to benefit the majority of the residents. So.
there an
Well, what do we
opportunity-
see as next steps here? You know, would it be an appropriate next step for Mr. Bessel and Alderfer and maybe someone from Kleinger's to walk that property and see what, just get an idea of what might be possible?
Wait, are you talking about Summit Park property? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
I'm talking about the 3 acres now.
Okay, all right, that's what I thought.
That's fine with me if you want me to try to take a look at it with those folks.
Well, if you use
Hey, do I have-
Klein, I would assume that we would have to pay for their participation.
You know, I'm going to make a suggestion here as well. If you want to authorize it, we could, Wally, you could talk to Kleinger's. I could contact at least 2 other engineers and ask them if they would do it gratis, just look at it and give me some idea. But we'll try to get it done at no cost. And it might be healthy for us to look at just a different engineering firm. Kleinger's is, they're very advanced. There may be someone who's more in the area of land stabilization that might be good to talk to for this.
And to your point,
Mike,
Mike,
if Kleinger's were willing to do it at no charge, just an initial, walkthrough, would you be okay with using Kleinger's, or do you
Sure.
think you can find somebody else who might be able to do a better job?
The only other person I'm thinking of that might do it just on a whim would be maybe Bear Becker might look at it with us. But if Kleinger says they'll do it for free, that's fine with me.
Okay, so the next step is then to first contact Kleinger's, see if they're willing to do it at no charge. If not, reach out to Bear Becker and see if they will.
Sure.
Since we're not spending any money here, I don't think we need a vote from the board. I think we can just move forward, and there'll be a report back at the next meeting. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Don, excuse me, Don, for the quote for the title report for $225 to confirm lack of covenant deed restrictions on the property, should we proceed with that?
Let's make sure. Thanks for bringing me back on that
Yes.
one. We never, I think we have a motion on the table, do we not? In a second to spend up to $225,000, up to $225 on as title search for the 1/3 acre property.
No, I think it's the 3 acres, no?
Is it 3 acres? Okay.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
for the 3 acres north of the water tower.
No. Yeah, I would support that.
Do we have a motion?
We do,
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Becky, do we have one already?
no, we do not have it already.
Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. I'm sorry. My speakers are not very loud here, so sometimes I'm not hearing everything that folks are saying. So is there any further discussion on this motion?
No.
One point, Don, and it's really directed to Mike. Mike, if you want to contact me when you guys go out there tramping around, I'd be happy to join you.
Okay.
I don't have any technical expertise, but I might be able to lend some legal expertise to it.
Great.
That'd be great.
You're welcome.
Free, right? Free, Tom.
Well, I was going to amend the motion.
Yeah, the other guy gets $225, Tom. What the heck?
Yeah, that's actually quite a bargain, and Mr. Hines is very good, so that's a good deal.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. We move on to item 5, a discussion of potential development of village-owned property of 10 acres at Glendale and Walnut Avenues. We discussed this last time. The follow-up was going to be to talk to, reach out to some developers who might give us some ideas as to what might be done on this property. I think that has been done, but I don't think they gave us very much. Mike, maybe you can just fill us in.
Oh, sure. There were a couple of developers and an engineer, and there was information given as to how the property could potentially be developed. Of course, there's sensitivity to stormwater control. So as it was discussed, the way that the topography is there would need to be some sort of water retention similar to what's at the Carruthers Pond site just to the west, probably down in the lower right corner or left corner, I should say, of that property. So something there for water control. And then throughout, it would be determined what needed to be done to make sure we don't end up with another potential bad situation from development. Most developers or the developers that were contacted were thinking somewhere in the range of 20, 25 homes. 30 homes is possible, but probably is pushing it for that site. The creation of park space would definitely limit it to less, to the lower number. And then respecting the properties next to it to the west might lower the number a little bit even more. There are larger homes on large lots right next to this property. So there seemed to be a desire to try to transition from those properties onto the rest of the property. So a number of homes maybe that might be a single family home or at least on larger lots. And that was, what I'm telling you is kind of a summation of opinion of a couple of different developers. As that thought process takes place, it definitely has an impact on the value of the property if the village were to sell it outright to a developer. Another approach that was brought up by developers was that the village somehow would become an equity partner within the development and could help steer the development itself, have some input as to what sort of housing would be where and how dense it might be, and also a potential cost savings, and possibly even increase the amount of money that might be available to the village through sharing in somehow sharing in profits, or at least being in a position that a bank would be in if they had to finance the property, so that the village would earn interest throughout the course of the property and get its money back as the property sold off. So that could net the village more money, but may take a little bit more time. That idea was appealing to me because it may give us a little bit more control. It also it helps us be able to see also from a financial standpoint what's happening on the property and what's happening within the development. The developers that gave input indicated that they have other infill projects, and they would call this an infill project. That's anything that's enough acreage to do a handful of homes up to maybe 80 homes in an existing residential area. They have projects, they said, where there were 5 roughly individual projects going on between the developers. Prices ranged from 500 to 550,000 up to in excess of 700,000. In one case, there was a roughly 80 unit development that is almost sold out after 3 or 4 years. One of the developers is a type of a developer that would potentially buy a single family home in Montgomery, knock it down and build a new house, or go out and try to acquire or assemble a larger and then build a larger number of homes on that property. The quality of the homes looked really good. Would certainly, I think, in value, probably stand up to the quality of the homes that are in that immediate area. The idea of lifestyle housing is very marketable right now. And also single family homes are very marketable right now. So some sort of a mix, again, that transition from the current single family homes into more of a more dense, I don't want to use the word dense, but maybe more closely positioned, lower maintenance, smaller yard, lifestyle type house. And again, sort of the partnering idea where the land might go in as equity. In that position, I think you could kind of be able to see financially what's going on, see physically what's going on. And as I said, as there is more land devoted to either park space, public space, green space, there's less land to build houses. So think of it this way, you may end up with 25 lots and you can build 25 homes and there's this much value in the land. However, Glendale might want more green space and more tree preservation. And we might end up with 15 homes, 15 buildable lots. And so the land has less initial value, but it might be a better development for the long run. So those are all things that kind of came out of this. I think Wally tried to do an estimate of tax revenue, and based on the numbers I was just discussing, and Wally, I just briefly looked at what you put together because I only saw it when I was logging in. Initially talking, it could be in the range of 50, 70, could be upwards of $100,000. I think if you maxed out the number of homes you could put on the property of annual tax revenue increase for the village, which would be nice. The idea of bringing more residents into the village, I think might help support our shops and our village square more. Certainly spread out the cost of our water system. But I guess in wrapping up, after talking to the folks, whatever happens there, if we do proceed with something, it's got to be good for Glendale. It's got to be good for all residents, both the residents close to it, the residents further away. And it has to be something that benefits the village before we would give up our green space. So are there any questions that I can answer? And
I think that was really good, Mike. Have you seen the development that is off of Montgomery Road near the Christ Hospital Outpatient Center?
Not sure I've seen that one. A couple of developers, by the way, did say we can take you through what we've done and show you models, but I'm not sure about that one, Mike.
It's a development that meets what I think is a sorely missed need in Glendale, which is lifestyle homes. And they're very well done, very high end, maybe very high end, but good size homes, nicely landscaped and everything else. And it's right off Montgomery and just south of the Harper's Point, Kroger's, and that whole area. It's a whole new development.
That vintage development.
Yeah, I mean, it's like sold out in no time at all.
Yeah, that is a good one, yes. And that's a good developer too.
Can someone help me understand what we're talking about when we're talking about lifestyle housing?
These are typically going to be homes that are geared towards, let's call them empty nesters or seniors that would like to maybe not so much downsize cost, but downsize maintenance. So most of these developers have experience where they begin the development, they start selling homes, there'll be an HOA that they manage until a critical mass is achieved, and then it's taken over by the homeowners. So typically that'll include landscaping, lawn maintenance, all that kind of stuff. They'll usually have either someone in charge of cleaning gutters, or they'll have special deals worked out with people that can do light maintenance type stuff around the homes.
So we're talking about basically like Carruthers Pond.
Kind of like Carruthers Pond. They're
Yeah.
typically smaller.
But one difference is that
less maintenance.
that a lot of the homes that we call lifestyle homes, to me, mean that the master suite is on the first level. And so the residents do not have to negotiate stairs. If there are stairs, they are more for visitors or but other uses, but the residents can spend most of their time on the first level. I've heard it called master on the main.
Yeah,
Right.
they're all first-story homes with a basement for the overflow of visitors and stuff like that, or family, friends, and so forth.
So you're talking about ranch style housing.
They're ranch-style housing, but the architecture of the roof line and everything else provides some kind of fills it in so it doesn't look like a flat house.
They're about a story and a half.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I'm just asking these questions because I'm not real. I understand what Mike Bessel has said about having different developers go in there and looking at it from different perspectives. So we're either talking about small ranch houses or we're talking about an $800,000 house. Is that it? I mean, that's the swing between what options there are.
Not necessarily, Joan. These homes, these lifestyle homes, are typically range from about 2,200 square feet up to about 3,500 square feet, which is a decent sized home. And these are the ones where I think I wasn't clear that their starting prices, their base prices for these homes are between $500,000 and $700,000, but typically built out, people will add $40,000, $50,000 worth of options. There were a couple of cases in that A unit build out, and I would ask, okay, you tell me this, show me for real how this happened. They were approaching $1 million. And this is a 2,500, 3,000 square foot home. There's options to finish basements and these types of things, upgrade appliances, different building materials. I was surprised, but at the price, but I guess typical construction cost now is in the range of $200 a square foot for this style house.
Yeah. The ones in Montgomery, Joan, are in the range $650,000 to $950,000. Just
And
like
those are lifestyle, Mike?
yes.
They also do a lot of amenity type things outside, the patio spaces and the built-in grills and all that stuff is also added on.
They're very, very nice. And it's, one floor plan or several floor plans to accommodate, older people like us.
To build on Joan's question, though, I mean, my impression is that there is a range of prices that lifestyle homes can come in, and 500,000 and up is certainly one possibility. But my impression is that there are these types of homes at all prices, and it would just be up to the village to decide where it kind of wants to, and at what level of luxury it wants to offer.
And that's what we're talking about, luxury homes.
Right.
I don't think we
So-
have to be just talking about luxury homes.
So when we're talking about it, and Wally can jump in here, if he did a little homework about, estimated tax revenue, I mean, because that's really what we're talking about, isn't it? The value of whatever tax revenue shakes off of that development versus maybe other options for that property, and or keeping the property as part of green space, right? That's
You're
the
looking
choice.
I'd
That's
like
the
to
choice
jump
that
in at
village
some
government has, right?
Mhm. But it's more important to consider long-term value and the tax revenue going forward, I think. Well, that's the important part of this equation when you say what's in it for the village, is what can we achieve long-term for our village? And if we want to keep a green space, that's one answer. But I think, things like tap fees, or what do you get for the land by selling it, that's an amount of money. But the long-term consideration is, what will the tax revenue be?
Right. I mean, because that's what we're talking about, economic development. We need to, that's the bottom line.
Right.
Mr. Mayor. I'd like-
Mr. Cordes.
Thank you very much. I do want to say one thing, Joan, on a comment you made, that what we're really talking about is the revenue, and I totally disagree. When I left here in 2011, there were some people asking if you ever hear of any smaller houses with first floor masters or lifestyle homes, as we were speaking about. I'd like to know first. I've heard about the waiting list at the condominiums at Brandywine, and when the few homes that are similar to lifestyle homes come on the market, it's almost a bonanza for people to get their bids in. When I came back in 2017, July of 2017, I was amazed at how many people would call the office and ask about lifestyle homes. One of the problems I recognize, and I think the village master plan from the 1930s, as well as 2000, talk about addressing the needs of the residents and being flexible and able to address the changes. We have a lot of older residents now, and I think many of them would like to stay in Glendale. A lot of them are looking for lifestyle houses. Those that have not found them have left Glendale, and I don't have enough fingers on my hands to count how many have left in the last 3 years that I've been back. So I would offer to you that any area, whether it's the northeast parcel or any other parcel in Glendale, that we can contribute more lifestyle homes is meant to address the needs of the residents. And the secondary factor is, does it cost the village anything to do this, or do we break even, or is there a plus side to it? But personally, as your administrator, I think our primary need is to address the needs of the residents and be flexible in the ever-changing needs.
I fully agree with Wally on that. My primary interest in this whole project is towards creating lifestyle homes that people both in Glendale and from outside of Glendale can live in as they have, let us say, aged out of larger, more higher maintenance homes, more with more staircases in them. So, I mean, yes, I'm definitely good. The money is definitely a factor here, but I think providing homes for our residents is the primary benefit to the village.
So what you're saying is then, I mean, we should stop analyzing this, that we've already made a decision. It's going to be like, we should recommend lifestyle homes. I mean, that's a question for village council.
Absolutely, it's a question for village council. I'm telling you what my interest is.
I think, Joan, also, it is, if you want to do this in a way that's successful, you have to rely on the opinion of seasoned developers, and what would work there. And certainly senior housing is desired in the neighborhood. And as Wally pointed out, there are a lot of people who would like to be able to stay in the village in a lower maintenance home. And I agree, that's one of the main drivers. When you get to financial benefit for the village, then it is being able to keep those residents, but then you also have to evaluate other factors.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you do, I mean, overall, again, it's really the choice between keeping the village you know, the ambiance of the village, the green space, the green belt, or whatever you want to call it, and, you know, versus more development, luxury housing. I think it, just from my own personal observation, and it's anecdotal, I think it's more outsiders downsizing from Wyoming, Green Hills, other areas coming here. It's not really for our village residents now. That's, I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't some, of course, you know, we all know there are people who have talked about it, but I'm just saying, you know, it's either, you know, you're talking about a population who would prefer to have the green belt and the green space to maintain the village ambiance and where they have lived for a long time, versus, say, you know, 25 houses and some one-time revenue generation. That's my concern.
Well said.
And I mean, I just think that, you know, the numbers have to be looked at a little bit more closely. I haven't really, we talked about it last time. We're talking about it now, so.
I guess in my own experience, Joan, there have been half a dozen people in the village who have expressed interest in being able to find not necessarily lower cost, but a lifestyle type home, master on the first floor, low or no maintenance, because they're in a bigger, older home.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all aware of people who are, you know, want to downsize. I mean, I don't think that's a, you know, mystery.
Me?
Mike?
No. Yeah, I mean, I'm clearly, Carolyn and I, my wife and I are clearly one of the residents that would love to downsize to something that doesn't require, you know, a ton of money just to keep the house from collapsing on itself every year. Just because of the, you know, the nature of the homes that we have. They require a lot of maintenance to maintain them. And we have looked at property, smaller homes, smaller parcels within Glendale that are not appealing, in the consideration of if we could tear them down and then build something that would be more appropriate for what we're looking at. So we're one couple. We have lots of other friends that have expressed that. Some have left the village because they couldn't find what they wanted here. But they love the village. That's the problem. I mean, we love the village, but unfortunately, at some point, we're gonna have to make some decisions whether we can find a home that doesn't require the ongoing maintenance. And it's you know, as Mike mentioned, it's not necessarily the cost, it's just the hassle of the ongoing maintenance of repainting the house every 5 years or so. So I'm just one person, so.
But if I may, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that in order to maintain the ambience that's being discussed, the village must be able to afford to maintain those services. And one of the issues we face is that every year we are struggling more and more to be what Glendale is perceived to be, and to be able to have the niceties. And in order to keep the green space, I'm in favor of it myself. I am also in favor of being able to downsize, but in either event, the village has to be able to maintain its persona, if I may call it that, and all the benefits, and it has to have some revenue. So we are seeking to provide homes, but we are also seeking to generate revenue. And if to do one or the other, there has to be either development or perhaps inheritance taxes, which we don't control, or an income tax, as no other village, few other villages are absent taxes.
Or another levy, or additional levy. So
Let me ask, what do people think would be a next step here? What, you know, what I would really like to see is a couple of different variations on potential development on this property. I would like them to include homes that are priced at well under $500,000, and to see what might be possible, and what would be the what would be the effects for the village, both financially and for housing availability. I would also, if people feel that this property should never be developed or should not be, do they have some other plan for it, something else that they would like to have done other than just leave it as it is? If they want us to leave it as is, that's fine. I get that. But if people say, well, it'd be really great if we could put something else in here. Anyway, I mean, I'd like to just as a next step, try to get something concrete in front of the board that we can kind of chew on, and then start to decide, well, what are the costs of doing it? What is the income? What is the revenue? What are the costs?
Are you talking about the resolution in the agenda?
The resolution was just a draft that it had been suggested at some point that we engage an engineer to survey this property, and I'm open to, when I say survey, I mean evaluate it for how it might be developed. But I don't know that we know enough to give the engineer any real direction on that. But I'm open to hearing it. If people would like to have an engineer do something, just say, take the current zoning and see what could be done with that.
So Wally, if I understand it, we have had that land surveyed, correctly?
We have. It shows as 20 some acres on Auditor's website. We knew that wasn't right. So John Duffy surveyed it using high-tech equipment, satellite imagery, and it's essentially 10 acres.
But I mean, clearly the boundaries, just like we did on Springfield Pike, do we have the boundaries established on that property as such?
We do. I don't know if David has that on his system, but I certainly have it on mine back at the office.
Okay. Because that would be the first thing. So we can delineate what the property is itself. As Mike pointed out, I mean, there is a low spot there at the lower corner. It all comes downhill from the back.
Well, that's, if you build anything there, it's impervious surface. And so you have to deal with additional rainwater runoff. And we all know from our own yards, when it falls on the driveway, it's got to go somewhere. And so if you were to develop that property, you would have to direct water flow similar to what was done at Carruthers Pond. So there'd have to be something there. So I'm also, I have a very strong feeling about Glendale and the ambiance here, and also have a strong feeling about some of the people that would like to downsize and also stay in the village. I have had people ask me, am I aware of any smaller homes that would be available that are low or no maintenance? And there are a few of those. I wonder, is there a way to approach one or two developers and give them the information that we're desirous of some lifestyle homes or whatever would work there from an economic standpoint and from a village need? Because with the other thing is, when you talk about economic development and needs for the village and people who want to live in Glendale, we just spoke previously about all the young families that are moving in here, and there are baby strollers everywhere. How many people would want to buy a home in Glendale now that Carruthers Pond is sold out? Would they want to buy a home in Glendale that is not a big old home, but they want to raise their kids in it? So, there's that part of it too. So, is there a way to have just to put some flesh on the bones? is there a way to develop it, preserve a good amount of green space, or even create a decent sized park that would be usable? Right now, the land's not used. And I would venture to say that where that pin is now, that rectangle that's highlighted up there, I would venture to guess that very few residents ever venture up in that area, even when it is mowed. So is there a way to maybe take a development only part of the way, a fewer number of homes, provide some of this housing that seems to be desired, but also, create some space that would be green space, park space, perhaps around the water pond area or something like that, that might satisfy both. Maybe that's a solution that helps satisfy all the needs.
I think
Okay,
that
how could we get
yeah.
just some options from developers? I think that's what we're looking at, and they would include the idea of maybe partial development and partial parkland, and also preserving as many of the old growth trees as possible.
Sure. Well, I think you would just ask that developer how far they could take a proposal before they would be into their own engineering and doing their own work and spending their own money. But how far they might take a proposal like that, give a couple of options. The idea of the engineer, which would cost $1,000 or $2,000, I'm sure, does not get you a stormwater control plan or anything like that. But that approach would be to say, given our current layout, wanting to preserve some green space, how could this property potentially be developed? And they would be able to approach it from the standpoint of not trying to maximize how much money I can make, typical developer, but what could work to achieve what Glendale is trying to achieve. And that could be something we would do if we can't get what we're asking from a developer. Also pointing out too, most developers have engineers, they have landscape architects. They can take a concept pretty far to where you've got something to at least look at. Ultimately though, I think we need to do what's the best thing for Glendale. And if that's to keep the park as is, or keep the green space as is, we do it. But I'll point out too, that's what Carruthers Pond was, the same as this 15 years ago.
Hey, Don, I don't suspect you know the answer to this question, but I'm wondering how other communities handle this very issue. I mean, Evendale, for example, I know is notorious for owning a lot of properties along Reading Road. And, over time they sell properties, they allow developers to come in and so forth. So I'm wondering how other communities handle this very issue. Do they send requests for proposals, requests for qualifications out? They publish them somehow and just throw it out to the marketplace to see what developers, what builders would be willing to invest a little bit of legwork into looking at this property and brainstorming a bit, putting something on paper and coming back to council or to this board. Of course, not being committed in any ways. And Kathy, that might be a question for you. I hate to put you on the spot, but I know you and your firm represent a lot of other municipalities.
RFPs have certainly been the case, as well as for some larger properties where the question's more open about what they want to do. They've explored doing some hiring a consultant to do a small kind of plan, so to speak, for the area, using some public participation, and use that as a guide moving forward to market the property and further obtain RFPs or whatever else they have to do. So it's kind of been many different degrees of formality, from very simple marketing it all the way to like a full planning process. And that's been done primarily within the CICs themselves. However, that's not to say there are not situations where the village participates a little bit more.
So I'll just, be candid. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves if we're going down that path of sending out RFPs. I think that we need direction from council about how far they want to take it. If this is something that is even worthwhile, if we start sending out RFPs or something like that, I feel like we're going down it's one thing to talk about potential development there. I think, sending out RFPs, I don't feel good about that. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I think, Joan, that's a little bit more formal process. And I think that any developer responding to a formal RFP is going to want to know that the council, or at least the governing body, is behind the development before they'd respond. Do you find that to be the case, Kathy?
Yeah, I would agree.
So is this something what could we get from a developer short of seeking sending out an RFP? But just saying, what would development look like on this property under various scenarios?
You might get a conceptual layout that shows a street location, rough lot size location. And that's probably about it. Location of green space and, again, water control areas. But it would be pretty rough.
Yeah, and to your point, Mike, might it even include attached housing instead of just detached single-family housing? I mean, there's a whole, an infinite array of possibilities.
Yes.
But we would, at some point, we'd have to rely upon the expertise of the developer, the development community, to come to us and say, this is what's possible. Right. And not just on a development side, but on a non-development side. If the consensus of council and of this board is to keep some open space, some development space, what's that blend? What's it look like? How's it developed? Again, we have to rely on the expertise of those people in the development community.
Right. Or hire an engineer to lay it out. And again, you're spending money. And your mention of attached housing, by far, the developers I spoke with said that the detached but fairly close together has been their preferred model and the marketable model versus attached homes. But that's not beyond the scope of what could happen there, I guess.
Well, I don't think that's luxury housing if it's attached.
No, typically not.
So Mike, what are the chances that any of the developers that could provide something like this for us?
I could ask. One actually showed something that was a very rough sketch, but it didn't feel it appropriate to take it any further than a conversation. Just because, there's no reason to at this point. It was just, what if, what could we do? Perhaps it could look like this. So it could ask the question, we could have a next meeting scheduled where that could be laid out and looked at.
So I think we need that before we would even approach council on, their support on, or their interest in doing something in that area.
And I think we somehow need community support, and I don't know how to do that without how do we understand how our residents feel about this? I know there are people scheduled to speak, so we need to probably speed it up, but.
Well, I would like to think about a survey at some point. And we did that for the quiet zone. And it did give us some guidance as to what the village wanted. So at some point, but I think we need something a little more specific than we now have in order to put a real question in front of the village. I'm just wondering, also, for those who advocate making this land more of a park, than a development. Is there a way that we can get a park design? What would it look like if all or part of this property were just turned into another park in Glendale?
It's another concept.
I guess, you know, I'll just say it. I mean, if our charge is economic development, I mean, I don't know why we would spend money on a park unless we're going to charge money to go to the park. I just, to me, I mean, I get the point, Don. I totally agree. It's an option for the village to develop that property into a more formal park. I don't think that's, you know, what they're looking at us to do.
I agree with you, Joan.
And,
Yes.
and you know, I get you're in the right place where you're thinking about what are amenities that residents would like, but that's not, I don't think that's our job.
Well, if we're going to present a question to council, I wanted to be able to present all sides.
Right, I
And,
get it, I know.
you know, and there,
Well, at this point, Don, I think it's either green space or it's as it is, or it's some sort of a development.
Right.
When I mentioned park, as it was within the context of if homes were built there and we added amenities to that area to try to help everyone feel good about the use of the land that's there. And at some level, just again, for stormwater control, there's going to have to be a reasonable amount of this property dedicated to water control. I also think a smart developer, there'd be a reasonable amount of this property that would be dedicated to some green space, even if it was just like one of these little triangle parks throughout the village, like Floral Park and the smaller one that's across the street, lower down on Fountain. I was going to say across the street from my house, but lower down on Fountain, maybe there needs to be something like that within it that sort of then becomes an amenity that helps maintain green space, maintain tree canopies, Glendale ambiance. So it's either, I get to Joan's point, and I'm being too windy here, but to Joan's point, you know, is it remain what it is, or it has become some sort of a economic development that might include some park amenity?
I mean, in
Park.
theory, I guess you could do like an office park, but I don't think it's zone, we'd have to change the zoning. I mean, you know, that's an option, but
Yeah.
it's probably a hollow option.
No, I mean, I agree with Joan and Mike. I mean, I know people want to talk about park and green space and so forth. We're the wrong people to be talking to about that. That's council. We need to be coming up with ideas and suggestions for council to consider. And then once council has decided, then it might be our job to execute what council is requesting us to do.
okay, so I'm hearing that there's some thought that we should approach at least one or two other developers, see what they could give us in terms of layout possibilities, and then bring those back to the next meeting.
And I would support that, because with that information, then, you know, with the administration, with Wally and David, we could put some numbers together on potential revenue and additional residents. And then we can float that to council and said, here's some ideas, you know, high level ideas of what could happen with this property here if council is interested. And if council said, we'd like to pursue this a little further, then we'll get some direction. If council says, no, let's move on, then we'll move on to something else.
Right.
Okay, I don't think we need a motion here. I think the direction is been given.
If Mike is willing to lead us through that exercise, or if we, you know, if any other bodies of the members of this group have resources they can reach out to, that would be another avenue too.
Right.
I mean, mine would be to contact that developer in Montgomery, if they would be interested in looking at this at all.
Isn't that Great Traditions, or isn't that the Tom Humes? Am I wrong? I could be.
I think it is. And he's one of the folks I talked to.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I really like those properties there. I mean, I personally, but
All right. Let's move on. Very quickly, we can just take a look at a couple other properties. These are more heads up that might be coming our way. So we have one at 65 Coral Avenue. And that one is a bit of a blighted house property right now. And David, maybe you can just give us a quick update on it, but it is property that could conceivably come to the CIC.
That's correct. Thank you. The property is in a bad way right now. Anyone who's very familiar with it knows that its maintenance has fallen off since 2018 when the previous owner passed away. The property has been transferred between a few banks in that time, stuck in probate. Thanks to Kathy, we've been working with the building inspector and our property maintenance inspector to try to check up on the status of that property. Unfortunately, we've hit pretty much dead ends up until now. The banks that we've been talking to that hold interest in the property have told us that there's very little for us without more legal muscle behind us. So we have discussed with the code enforcement officer and our building inspector to investigate pursuing condemnation of the property, at which point we would notify the bank that we were condemning the property and take necessary steps to remove any blight or dilapidated structures, and then have ultimately first refusal to the property, at which point it might be fitting to come to the CIC, be transferred to the CIC for their consideration. I'm not sure if there are any questions about it. I know that it is an eyesore and is something we've been working on for about a year to get it remedied, to little success up until recently.
One question that, some people might wonder about is the mortgage holder is pretty easy to find. You can just go into the public record and find that. Why haven't we been able to do anything now with that information?
So our code enforcement officer, who has been working on this property for about a year, did reach out to the mortgage holding bank, and they told him that they would not release any information without a subpoena, without court order. So the village has been stymied by that because they won't release the current owner information, nor will they release information on who is paying property taxes. The property taxes, interestingly enough, on the property are current and are being paid, although we are unable to discover who between the auditor's office, the treasurer's office, and the mortgage holding bank. So the best course of action, it seems at this point, is to pursue with condemnation.
Don't you think the mortgage holder is paying those taxes?
Yeah, wisdom might say that. But like I said, we have no confirmation of who is doing that. But the property is avoiding tax foreclosure.
Well, I agree with your actions to this point, or your proposed actions, whether it be a condemnation or an investigation of the property to find out if it's a public nuisance or a public liability or danger. Just until you apply some amount of pressure, this property at this value is a blip on that bank's radar screen. They don't even care about it. And until you apply some pressure, I don't believe there'll be any movement on that property. Would you agree with that, Kathy?
Correct. And I think the priority at this time is to make sure that we nail down exactly what degree of public health and safety issue is at play and really act on that moving
Just not
forward.
maintaining property, I'm sure they're not mowing the grass or anything.
Right.
Based on, oh, I'm sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
Well, and just because of all the structural and access issues with the property that are potentially there, it's important at this time to make sure that we have a handle on that. And that'll go through all the protocols. That's another one for which we would have Bob Hines complete a full report on any parties and interests that may be in play over the last 30, 40 years, so that everybody gets a full notification once we do have a handle on what's going on, so that we can move forward and make sure at the very least that the property is safe and secure,
And
whatever that takes.
And a drive-by inspection of the property revealed that there's a tree growing through the roof. There's a lot of trash and unkept property around it. So it's obviously
Getting in and.
exactly. Now, our building inspector, Mr. Don Mercer, is very well equipped to handle the necessary inspections to prove that this might prove to end up being a public nuisance or a public health hazard. So we'll proceed as we can legally and with Mr. Mercer's direction.
But it's outside of this body.
now.
Yeah.
Right.
But-
The only reason we're raising it is that, like other properties that end up being blighted and problem properties, the village sometimes acquires them and then would want the CIC to sell it.
Correct.
A shorter report on the landmark property. Of course, we don't own that property, and we probably never will. We do, however, have control the zoning there. And we know that Evendale and the church have been talking from time to time about Evendale acquiring the property. So we're going to bring it up if anything comes along, and we have some indication that it might be happening sooner rather than later. When it does, that we'll bring it to council, and council may ask for the input of the CIC. With that, I'd like to move on to the public comment section. And we have 6 people who have asked to speak. And as I said before, we will allot them 4 minutes apiece.
Before we proceed, I'd like to point out that I did hear from a Mr. Mark Henn, who's present in the attendees list, just before the meeting, that he wanted to attend and that he would like to speak.
Okay, is there any objection to adding one more to the speaker list?
Nope.
Okay, could I have that name again?
Mark Henn, Henn.
Okay. All right, we will start then. Our first speaker is Ron Vischer. David, can you promote Ron to speaking?
He's coming up now.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk, I've got 3 key points. I don't know if I'll get to all of them, but I believe the GCIC recommendation should be strategically sound. I believe the recommendation should be financially prudent, and I believe the work should be done with the concurrence of council. Concerning strategically sound, I think it's helpful to look at the strategies that Glendale has put together in its village plans. We're very fortunate that the plan of 1851, historically, that we purchased a rolling, partially forested farm from a farmer named Mr. Glenn and established a planned community that included parks like Floral Park and Small Park in the village. So our history of parks as being part of Glendale goes all the way back to its founding. In 1942, we decided that we needed a new village plan, or we needed to update it, and we created the village plan in 1944. And that plan recommended that we acquire green belts on the north and south village borders. And based on that plan, we purchased municipal forests, one which became the Oak Greenbelt, and another which includes Johnny's Park and Greenbelt. At the last meeting, I noticed there was a lot of discussion and semantic distinction about what was a greenbelt and what was a green space and what was a park. I think it's really helpful to know the history there, because these spaces were purchased using Glendale resident tax money to create green belts, and that was their intent. It also is of interest that the village plan recommended that the village entrance in Johnny's Park have some interest features. And as I've driven down that road by Johnny's Park, I noticed that it's one of the few entrances to the village that has no signage that indicates we're entering the village. I think that's something that's missing. And again, F1 and F5, which were the two green belts, were purchased or at least partially donated with village tax funds. And I think it's a return that the village residents expected. The village plan of 2000 updated that. It was funded by the National Park Service and the US Department of Interior, and included the work of 100 village residents that were acknowledged on the first page of the village plan. And strategy one that was developed by that plan was to develop a program for green space and green belt expansion, not conversion to residential or other uses, but rather to expand that green space. And that was in 2000. Concerning residential units, they also recognized that we had a need for additional residential units, and they identified locations for 73 additional spaces that were available for residential development and future growth. And again, 2000 was after Warwick, it was after St. Edmunds, it was after Glen Meadow, it was after much of the development we're talking about. And there were 73 spaces they identified that were privately owned for residential development. And that did not include an additional 60 to 80 spaces in Landmark. And so I think looking at that plan and seeing if we can address the needs for patio homes in currently privately owned lots that would be available for that development might be something that the GCIC could encourage. In 2000, the year 2000, we had just 6% undeveloped space plus park space combined, which was down from 40%, that's 6% down from 40%, which existed in 1944. And so the question as we continue to develop green space, think about doing that, is do we have a target value? Importantly, these master long-range plans are approved by Village Council and the Village Planning Commission. And I believe these plans and strategies should be part of the GCIC plans for the future. Do I have time yet, or am I all done?
Yeah, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Lee Thomas.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the board this evening. I wanted to first speak to the response that we've had on a public awareness project regarding the development of and sale of these green spaces. Wanted to just share with the board members that we've had overwhelming concern from residents regarding the development of the green spaces. A lot of shock and residents coming forward to say that, you know, when they moved into the village many, many years ago, they understood that it was important to the village to maintain these green spaces. So it is our hope that the council members that are on this board and the council members that are not will be listening to their constituents and kind of get the pulse of the community to know what the residents are wanting. And I appreciate Mr. Lofty saying that he would be encouraged to do a public survey. I want to speak briefly regarding the property at Walnut and Glendale. that property has been determined by this board to be underutilized property, but as Ron, I think, spoke, there's no signage on that property. There hasn't been. We've lived across the street from that property for 6 years. There's no signage letting residents know that that is public property available for public use. There's no parking. There's no place for residents to pull over if they wanted to have a picnic on that property. So I think it's underutilized, but it's underutilized because the village has not invested any infrastructure into that piece of property. We know that the maintenance of that property, they mow just the perimeter of it, which, makes it difficult for public use when the property is not properly maintained. And I think that's all I had. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Beth Sullenberger. Hello, Beth.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm speaking as a resident tonight of 1080 Morse Avenue. And I think it's fine to sell condemned property, but I strongly oppose the development of any greenbelt land, particularly the parcel at Glendale and Walnut, which was expressly acquired as greenbelt years ago. I think it's a bad policy to develop every square inch in the village. Once it's built, it's gone forever. We need green space to buffer us from the sea of asphalt that surrounds us. And our 2000 master plan says that many village residents, I'm quoting now from the plan, many village residents seek the acquisition of more green belt as a major component of Glendale's future green infrastructure. Resident survey respondents indicated their interest in acquiring more green belt that would contribute to this system and buffer the village further from surrounding development. It's very disappointing to me that we are now considering using village land to build a product that was proposed by Dries on the landmark property, which I believe would have provided many more housing units than this green space would provide. I think we should look to the landmark church property. They actually want to sell it instead of selling off our green belt. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Cindy Taylor.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'll be a little more direct. I have 4 points to make. Number one, thank God number 65 is getting some progress. I'll be so happy when that's taken care of. Number two, there is actually 1 lot left at Crothers Pond for sale, and I'd be happy to show it to anyone. And were some plans done for it. So it's the last lot left and it is for sale. Number 3, I think we should be focusing on families and attracting them to the village. And number 4, this seems to be moving along very quickly. Is there a timeline? Is this trying to get done before the election in November? I'm just seeing it go at a very rapid pace. And I'm trying to see if there's a timeline attached with this. The green space.
I guess all I can say is there is no timeline.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say from my viewpoint, this is moving very quickly. And I just want to make sure, because I know the committee has been comprised of a lot of people in favor of it. I just want to make sure it isn't going too quickly for the residents not to be heard. And that's my 4 points.
Next, Marilyn Duke.
Miss Duke does not appear to be in the list of attendees.
Okay, so she is not, is she no longer at the meeting?
Correct.
So next, Paul Breidenbach.
Mr. Breidenbach is also not among the attendees.
And then we have Mark Henn. Mark, are you there?
Just a second, everyone. I clicked the wrong button for Mark. There we go. I apologize. He'll be coming in.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So I appreciate the time here addressing the CIC, and I appreciate the work that you're doing here as well. I recognize that your goal is to recognize where we can do economic development. Now, I'm addressing the corporation tonight as a resident. I live at 440 Glendale Avenue, so the property specifically at Glendale and Walnut butts right up against my property to the east of my property there. And yeah, I just want to address, when I moved here in 2016, I even went to the town hall and asked specifically about this green space, because that was something that was important to me, to recognize that a place where I went does recognize and value that green space. And we talked about that, and they, obviously no guarantees, but they were expressing to me the value that Glendale did put on the green space. And I was happy to hear that. I understand economic development. I own a business as well, and I like to see progress, so forth. I recognize that we want to keep up the services, amenities, the lifestyle that the village of Glendale provides to its residents. We don't want to see that fall behind, so I'm right in with that as well. When I think specifically of the property, though, at Glendale and Walnut, a couple things come out, I guess, stick out to me. One, it is a place where we do have significant, residential space already there. Residences to the west, residences to the east, more dense space to the south, even with the condominiums there as well. So having that green space as more of an aesthetic value, I think, is a very important piece of lifestyle. And I guess here's the point I'm getting to, and I will reference this again to the council and things like that as well. When we look at an economy and trying to address economic development, I don't want to go so far where the economy should wind up serving the people, not the people serving the economy. And what I mean by that is, at some point, we need to address the fact that we can't just develop every single space because the economy is the most important thing. I think we need to recognize that having that green space and have the economy, the area serve the people, is important. And so when I look at the density of the residences already here, when I look at that particular green space, I think there's a lot of great things that could be done with that to serve the people of Glendale. And as other presenters have addressed, has not been necessarily addressed from the standpoint of signage, letting people know it's public space that they can utilize and things like that. So I look forward to seeing how this progresses, but I wanted to express that the importance, I think, of that green space from that standpoint of assisting the people in the village as opposed to the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our speakers, and is the final item on the agenda. Before I suggest adjournment, is there any further comment from the members of the board?
I wanted to just give the board an update on our finances. Just a quick one. I should have provided that maybe someplace in the agenda.
Okay.
Our bank account, we're $26,001.
That 1 cent is earned interest.
1 cent. Yeah.
Is that your full report, Mr. Treasurer?
That's the full report. Yes.
Okay.
Down to the penny.
All right. Any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. Once again, good patient job and good discussion tonight. So I suppose we should think about our next meeting. We've been doing, this, we had 1 month since our last meeting. Is there a appetite to do another one in a month?
I think in a month, I think it would be good. We've got a couple follow-ups, which is I guess, looking at the Springfield Pike property by Mike and others, and authorization to spend some money to survey that, I think. And then Mike was going to provide contact some developers to see if we can get some additional ideas for that piece of property we were just discussing then.
Okay. The 1 month from now would be Sunday, April 11th. So we're looking at the week of April 12th. And I'm just looking, I don't see where I have any particular conflicts that week. So should we do one, say, on that Wednesday, the 14th?
Just before tax day?
Sure.
Yeah, Wednesday is better for me than Tuesday. Thanks.
Okay. And did 5 o'clock work for people, or would we want to try to do it earlier at 4? What's the thinking there?
I think 5 o'clock is fine, and it allows others who have to work during the day.
I think it's most convenient for the residents who might want to attend. So 5 o'clock on April 14th.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And
Thanks.
Well,
Thank you.
stay well.
Same.